Washington has plenty of questions to answer this fall.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Lars, we got a really fun show coming out all day every day today. But before we get there, just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click the little bell as well so you don't miss when we post a new video. Drop us a comment down below, leave a like on the video, and if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review. That all really helps us out a lot. As well, if you like what we're bringing to you from spring practice, make sure you go follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're there at Locked On Huskies with interviews, updates, all sorts of different stuff we can't always get posted over here, so go check that out as well. Lars, today we're going to talk some more recruiting. Davon Benjamin recently came up on an unofficial visit. That was really huge. Landon Barnes, 4-star defensive lineman from Texas, has changed his official visit schedule. We'll get into who is coming on campus this weekend. But we've got a lot of questions saying, hey, we know you guys are pretty optimistic about what goes on, but what questions this team needs to answer? What are some things that might maybe not necessarily are huge concerns, but where's the most improvement need to be shown this fall?
It's a cliche in a way, but taking that next step, we all know the talent is on the roster. We know how good Damon can be. We know how good Jonah. You just go down the list of guys. I mean, if you want me to go down the roster, all the receivers, all the offensive line, that sort of thing. But can the guys that we know how good they can be take that next step? Because that's really what you're looking for. And it's not necessarily one thing or another. It's not, can Damon make this read or can he not do this? It's just, can you just overall level up yourself mentally, physically, all those sorts of things? We're seeing some of those being answered, but I think it's still, once you get through the summer, another summer conditioning with TO, all those sorts of things, come back in the fall, then we'll really have a better sense of it.
So I like where you're going with that, because that kind of leads into the biggest thing for me, where everything you're saying was dead on. And a lot of that, in my opinion, falls on Jedd Fisch, where you can look at this and say, hey, there were a couple games last year where, a different decision on the goal line, maybe you win the Apple Cup. And then, a couple things go differently. Obviously, Grady didn't have his best day when we think about that Rutgers game, but a couple of things go differently. And we're talking about this team in a whole different light as, an 8-4, without, think about the bowl game, because they probably play in a different bowl game, just an 8-4 team that has a lot of potential. You're still looking at this transfer portal haul and saying, hey, that was really solid. Yeah, they folded against the good teams they played, right? The Indianas, the Oregons, Penn State. You folded against the college football playoff teams. But now I think it's on Jedd Fisch, who, and something you and I have talked about a lot, is he needs to find a way to overcome the red zone issues that he saw last season. And I think a big part of that is going to, end up proving, hey, is Damon Williams going to, really unlock that? And we saw at different points last season that he did. And is that going to continue this season? And are you not going to be, I know at some point last season, it was a 60% touchdown rate, scoring from inside the 20-yard line. Can you improve on that? And the offensive line will be a big part of that too. And I think that's kind of where we need to go next, is this offensive line. We like the way it looks so far, but they still have a ways to go in terms of proving what they can do against other competition.
Absolutely. I mean, for every time you'd see in practice where I think it was on Tuesday when Damon was getting pressured a decent amount and had to roll out when they were specifically working in the red zone, you could just see like, hey, defense seems to be winning this one. That's fine, because again, the defense should be winning some of these. And then how does Damon and the offense and specifically Jedd respond? Because like we're saying, like you went and got Carver Willis. You still have another year of Max McCree in the program. Drew Azzopardi is another year older. All these guys, like we've seen throughout the first half of spring practice, they have confidence in them to get better. And that's why I kind of wanted to leave with like, hey, just take that level up, because you didn't overhaul the position in the offensive line in terms of, hey, we need to get, 4 or 5 new transfers. We're going to get rid of a bunch of guys. Like, no, they're just young and somewhat inexperienced. The Pocky Freenows, the Zach Hennings, the ETCs of the world. You just go down that list and think, we've seen them emerge a little bit in spring ball, but can you play consistently at that high level? And, like when we talk about the red zone, that's where it comes into play where, hey, maybe he's good in certain areas, but then you struggle down here. And that's why maybe having a Gear and Hatchet as a veteran transfer is a good addition to, supplement, hey, help them out in these couple areas. And I think they have all the pieces to make it work.
So I agree. And so let's talk about Gear in that light, where you and I have talked about it before. I'm sure what a lot of people will say when they look at this offensive line is, hey, you've got two true freshmen that have been running with the ones at different points in time in Champ Talialia and John Mills. So it's one of those things where people are going to look at that and they're going to say, well, having true freshmen in the rotation is never the sign of a strong offensive line. But at the same point in time, it's one of those things where we look at Zach Henning. We look at Gear and Hatchet and Pocky Finau and say, hey, they're confident in this group of guards already at the position. And if you want to supplement it with guys who, no matter who you read, it's not even just us saying this. When you go and talk to anybody out there on the field who has been there as, whether it be as a spectator or as a member of the media, it's these offensive linemen are bigger and stronger, and they look just so much different than you did at any point last season, which is something that I think you should feel just comfortable with. Where if you're not, it's not like you're asking John Mills to say, hey, you're the starting right guard for 13 games this season, and we're going to figure out from there. That's not the route that you're going with this. I think that they will certainly have a long way to go, and we might see some growing pains, but you're in a solid spot in terms of you have a rotation there. You have a solid depth, which we didn't see at any point last year. And that makes me feel comfortable on that side, or at least I think that, again, you still have to prove it against competition, but it should make you feel just solid enough that, hey, all those bodies are there. And I feel the same way about the defensive line.
That was exactly what I was going to say. It's a perfect segue because you went and had to get a few more transfers along the D-line, Pepa, Anterio, Thompson, Ty. There's a few more than the two you had on the offensive line. But again, similar situation. You have Elenius Davis, Bryce Butler's the JUCO, so he's a little bit older, but same level in that realm where you have depth and you have guys you're expecting to be front end. And keep in mind, this is all without even saying Zach Durfee. I know it's edge, outside linebacker versus D-line, but you're just talking about that front defense in general. All the bodies, that's what's so intriguing is the amount of rotations that you can have, where it's almost the cliche is the hockey line, right? One line, two line, three line. You're probably right now at three lines, like three solid lines. I think on the roster, there's enough talent to have five. You just have to make sure, between now and the end of fall camp, start of the season, you coach the other two lines up.
So I'm at the point where I look at the defensive line and, health is certainly going to be a big question, right? You have to prove that you can stay healthy. Where Zach Durfee, we know what the lore around him is, but can he stay healthy for 12, 13 games? That's going to be a big question this fall. And on the interior, I think the biggest question there is anybody going to stand out? I think that Anterio Thompson certainly has the capability. I think Simote, Pepa, Elenius Davis all have the capability to be above average, just impact players. But that's just something that makes me feel just comfortable with that group as well, is the depth. You talk about the hockey lines. We didn't see that depth there at any point last season where, a guy goes down here, a guy goes down there, and all of a sudden it's, you're asking Jacob Bandis to take 40 snaps a game, which is not his game. And that shouldn't be, anybody's just ask on the interior of the defensive line, especially.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing to consider in all that is you have certain guys that are going to pop, which are going to be the ones that, because the two names that come to mind are Armand and Javon Parker for slightly different reasons, where we've seen Armand on the field this spring, Javon obviously still working back from the ACL. Those are two other guys along the interior D line where if you get, and this is no slight to them, anything from them this season significantly, that could, again, there's another 1.5 win plus where you're talking about, we might not need you for a bunch, but if you could just be that solid depth guy as you work back from your injury and, if Javon happens to just emerge or if Armand happens to emerge, so be it. But those are two guys where I think they're still sticking around. They're right on the precipice. Can you put it together in one season together? I mean, obviously Javon will be starting a little bit later than Armand, but those are two other key pieces that I think can't be forgot about because they might get lost in the shuffle.
No, I agree. And now the question is that group as a whole just taking a step forward and showing that you have the physicality and the strength to withstand a Big Ten schedule. And it's going to be interesting because the depth was so important. I think that's the critical thing where people might see it and say, oh yeah, there's no one name that jumps off the pages. That guy is going to be, a Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham game wrecker on the interior. But right now, I think you're just taking a step in the right direction by saying you have a whole bunch of guys that can do a job and play solidly in this Ryan Walters scheme. can just find a way to win matchups and hold up, which is, at the start of the season, at the very least, I think that's a solid building block. But Lars, we got to get to this recruiting class because there are 4 really intriguing prospects coming in this weekend. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel has given new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. And you know me, I'm placing my money on the Celtics. I got them going back to the NBA Finals this year. I think they're going to face off with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that's really what I'm going to be keeping a big eye on because I think they have the chance to go back-to-back. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. So, Lars, there are going to be 4 official visitors coming to campus this weekend. That's 4-star running back Brian Bonner and 4-star offensive lineman Sam Utu, both from Southern California. You've got 3-star offensive tackle Aaron Thomas from Arizona that's coming in, and 4-star Auburn commit and wide receiver Denarius Gray coming in from Florida. This is a really intriguing group here. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the fact that you're bringing in 2 offensive linemen because they're both listed as tackles on 247. Obviously, Sam Utu is the guy that came in.
I think he'll end up playing guard.
Right, but just listed as just
yeah
for sake of argument here, where you're looking at bringing in 2 different types of guys, how we say, because Aaron Thomas absolutely tackle. Like I think that is a safe bet. But when you look at Uju and Thomas, can you find a way? Let's conservatively say in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Can you get a commitment, or is this one of those where you just kind of know, hey, we got to play this one out. This is our turn to get them on campus? Because I think there's a couple of the guys that we'll talk about in the segment where I think they're closer to committing than people might think.
So I do like where you're going with that, where when I think about just what this visit weekend is going to look like, you talk about commitments where we just talked about it the other day, right? Cody Green is the number 1 target in the sense of offensive lineman. But I think Sam Utu has been just kind of in that realm of priority recruit for a while now, just in terms of where he sits on the board. And it's not just the recruiting ranking, right? It's the talent, it's the flexibility, it's the ability to play inside and out. And he's somebody where I go through his list of official visits here. He's got 3 other ones scheduled: SMU, USC, and Texas. You're sitting in a solid spot there. Obviously, USC is still just cleaning up on the recruiting trail right now. So that's a tough pull, especially for somebody in Southern California. But I look at Aaron Thomas, and that's one where, some people are going to look at it and say, oh, a 3-star recruit who's played 1 year at tackle down in Arizona, and say, that's really the guy you want to take this early. And I say, absolutely yes. Where I look at that frame, I look at the athleticism, and I look at everything that he does really well on film. And it's nice that you're prioritizing him. You're getting him in on that first official visit because his stock is starting to rise. You and I talked about him a couple of weeks ago when he got an Ohio State offer. And I just look at it and I say, you really want to build an offensive line. Obviously, the cornerstone would be Cody Green, if you're able to pull that off. But then right behind him, it's, I think about 1 or 2 things that Scott Huff would do every year is he would find a way to take a developmental tackle. Sometimes they pan out, right? And you're able to just get somebody who's a contributor 2-3 years down the line. And then sometimes they don't. I think about guys like Sam Peacock, guys like Elisha Jaquette, who, we'll see how that works out, where he hasn't necessarily put on enough weight to play the position yet. And you say, I still like where the frame is and I like where it's going. And I think about Aaron Thomas and I say, he has all the measurables and all the tools to really develop into a promising tackle. His dad played offensive line at Florida State. And I really like that they're prioritizing him this early.
I'm glad that was a perfect segue to say off that I believe Aaron Switzer, his first offer was to Aaron Thomas. Or Michael Switzer. Yeah, Aaron Thomas, Michael Switzer. but because I remember when I talked to Aaron briefly, it was like, hey, I didn't know it was his first offer. That's pretty significant. And then since then, the Ohio States of the world, other big schools have jumped in. So it's worth noting, like you said, like Utu was obviously on the Washington general radar, previous staff, all those sorts of things. Like there had been interest there. But the fact that Switzer is like, hey, you know what? Let me go back to Mateo Mele's former school.
Yeah.
And then that's the name that came to mind when you said the developmental guy that will be could be in the rotation 2-3 years. That was Mateo Mele, was it not? I mean, like if you think about it now,
that's a good comp.
Isn't it like a like for like comp? No. But the point being that like the principle is there where, oh, well, is this guy going to be our starter? It's like, I think we've seen over the past couple of years, you need 5 plus 3. And this is one of the plus 3. And at 6'7", 300, like, good with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Where you look at what that could be, because a lot of offensive line recruiting is projection, and he's the one where you take now and then in 2 years it's, oh, Aaron Thomas is in competition to be, the starting right tackle. It's, oh, okay, yeah, no, I see just the development track. I see just all of the reasons that could amount to that. But Lars, you talk about guys who you think might commit soon. I this is not a prediction. I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Bonner ended up pulling the trigger pretty soon, where I look at this recruitment and I say, it seems like Scotty Graham has been really hard after him for a while. He's talked about just his focus on wanting a good academic school. And we look at some of his finalists here where I think it's going to come down to Washington and Notre Dame. And the fact that Notre Dame is his final official visit on June 20th, that certainly means something. But there's certainly an opportunity for Scotty Graham to seal the deal between now and then.
There's also a major gulf between when he's coming up for his visit to Washington and right now going to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
In between there, that's absolutely a window where I could say, hey, you know what? I appreciate it, Marcus. Really means a lot. Obviously, Notre Dame just in the national championship, but by the way, Washington national championship 2 years ago. So I'm going to try and bet on the West Coast horse here. Maybe we'll meet on March 1st or January 1st or whatever it ends up being down the line. But for me, I think just Brian Bonner, when Deshaun Rideau went to USC, that was to me when I was like, okay, we had talked about this, where can you pull off both? Because you're probably getting one or the other, but the question is, can you pull off? Right, I was never going to work. But just, again, a guy can dream, right? God forbid a guy has vision here. But speaking of good vision, that's why I think there's Brian Bonner and Scotty Graham are such a good pairing. And you look at the other schools that he's considering, it's like, yeah, like, I could, in a different realm, I could see it, but I think there's just too much relationship built up between Scotty Graham and Brian Bonner, the whole staff at Washington, where it's like, I'm just going to stay on the West Coast. But I do think it's kind of worth noting in that light, I don't think Notre Dame's going to stop. So I think even when Brian Bonner, in my opinion, when Brian Bonner commits to Washington, that's still going to be one where kind of like Asa Turner way back, and like, hey, let's make sure we don't forget about this one just because, he's in the boat now.
So you talk about the two running backs where it always felt like Deshaun Rideau had been a USC lean for a while, and trying to get a shot with him, there's no harm in taking it. But it always felt like even between those two, it was, hey, Brian Bonner is the one that we're really prioritizing here because we know we have a better shot there. And you're in his top 5, you secure that first official visit, and that could certainly be this is the second time in 2 months he's coming up, where he was on campus for the junior day last month, and now he's coming back for the official. There's a lot going on there where, hey, he's a great pairing with Ansu Sinoe. And we talked about it before when we talked about just what kind of pairing that could be with the just big physical runner that Ansu is between the tackles, combined with the fact that Brian Bonner is also really good between the tackles and doesn't just get outside and use his speed. He's a really intriguing, really patient running back that has developed so well already, where you look at 2026 and Adam Muhammad is certainly going to be just that guy. And then you'd expect Jordan Washington to be right behind him. But if he comes in and he overtakes, whether it be Quade Carr, Julian McMahon, whoever else on the roster, that's certainly wouldn't be a shock. And he has just kind of that level of upside. And I'm sure that's something that Scotty Graham is selling is, look at all these running backs that I put on the field really, really early between Jonah Coleman, Adam Muhammad, other guys down at Arizona. And I think he would fit that mold really well. And truly, I think he's going to excel wherever he goes, but he would be a really great fit for this Washington offense as well.
I completely agree. And I think that's why Scotty, where we've clearly not said he wants 2 per class. And, you mentioned could either one usurp Julian McMahon or Quade Carr. Much like Jedd Fisch would say, figure that out when we get to practice. Well, we just want the talent. And I think, this is no slight to any of the guys I want to mention, but Scotty had 1 4-star with Jordan Washington in the first couple of years. Now you're about to arguably have 2, 3 in the span of 6, 7 months. So for me, that's Scotty Graham saying, hey, you know what? Competition's there, but also now I need some top end, let's make sure all the chips are in the middle of the table sort of situation. And the combination of the two really, I think, is what Scotty's vision is. That's how he's selling his vision is, hey, look, I already got answer for this. I think I can build you guys into 2 complementary backs who can kind of do similar things but differently. Let's do it together. And I think that the longer it festers, unlike some recruits, it's, you know what, let's just stay home, go to Washington.
So I like where you're going with there. Before we move on, we talked about him a lot yesterday, which is why we didn't spend nearly as much time doing so today. But Denarius Gray, this is such an interesting case where I look at this recruitment and offering him late, getting him up on an official visit almost right away is just a really interesting play. And, it's obviously Jedd's got his Florida connections, and Kevin Cummings has made a big push to just flip guys from outside of the region, some of these top prospects. And I like the idea here. And I'm just really curious to see how it plays out. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's always the best strategy, but you might as well take this swing and see what happens, because he is committed to Auburn. And the fact that this is the only official visit he's set up so far is certainly something that, is just worth noting, I think, because on the field, he's a really fun player. I really like how he just how intelligent he is, especially as a route runner. He's really crafty in the way he releases, gets off the line of scrimmage. So that's certainly something I want to keep an eye on moving forward. But I look at him in the similar light that I am with Tyson Bacon right now, who's scheduled to visit during the spring game. And I say, I don't know if you're going to pull this flip off as of right now, but like we talked about on yesterday's show, you might as well take this swing and see where it lands rather than not even exploring it at all. But Lars, speaking of taking swings, Washington's taking a big one on 4-star defensive back Davon Benjamin. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. You can play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console, and if you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your or your kids' games wherever you plug in. For me personally, if I'm out on the road this football season, I'm taking mine with me because I want to drop into Verdansk anytime, anywhere, have a little bit of fun playing some Call of Duty Warzone. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV locked on to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. So, Lars, there have been a couple of reports that Devon Benjamin was on campus for an unofficial visit at some point in the last week. And this is somebody who you and I have talked about a lot. We kind of backed off of that because it seemed like Oregon had really taken a big lead there. And he told, I believe it was On3's Chad Simmons, that he's intending on taking an official visit to both schools, Oregon and Washington. And this is one of those guys where, we look at the way this defensive back class is shaped up right now, where you got CJ Lavender, you've got Elijah Durr, and Kasani Giles. This is a really solid class so far, but it looks like you're still trying to take a few really big swings with Chase Calicut, who was on campus last weekend. Devon Benjamin is another really nice one. And then Jaron Jones as well from Mission Viejo, who's somebody I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of different places to go with this. I mean, we all know that John Richardson is not going to stop. Like, there's just a guy that when he identifies a certain talent, it made me think back to Dijon Lee last season where, hey, Washington was in it, then there was kind of quiet, and then we always said, like, hey, you know what? Washington's always just going to be around. Like, they're just going to – until he signs the paperwork and it's official, there's just always – because that relationship is there. And I think, when you look down the West Coast – John Richardson can look at Devon Benjamin and say, hey, you know what? You want to complete this class, stay on the West Coast, be a guy that can just, start right away, potentially for us. Again, potentially, no slight to the guys in the room right now, but just, potentially. And you look and think, like, down the line, we talk about, oh, hey, Washington, DBU, this and that. There have been a couple of guys that have been missed. Let's maybe try to right a couple of wrongs here, like, we think of another Benjamin back in the day that didn't come to Washington that probably should have. Like, again, just all those sorts of things. Because John Richardson is the perfect coach to do that. He's a guy, and then you pair him with Taylor Mays and Ryan Walters. And again, like, no pun intended, but it's always the trifecta. There's always that triangle that Jedd's working with where it's, the main coach at the top, call Ryan Walters, and then Richardson and Mays, or you flip it, whichever one you want to call it. Like, they all seem to be working together, and I think that's why some of these guys are starting to come back up for second and third visits. Hey, you know what? new staff getting positive eyes. Maybe let's go back up there now. Maybe they're more comfortable. Let's see what happens. And then, oh wow, actually I do like Washington, and it's surprising.
So that's one of the really interesting things that I feel like we've seen a lot more of in recent weeks. And it kind of started with the Cody Green report after he took his unofficial visit. Was, there are a lot of just recruits that some of these national guys will talk to that we try to get a chance to talk to as well. And they're all saying, I really like what just the vibe and the culture that this staff is putting together. And it's something special, and it feels like something that I want to make sure I really thoroughly consider, which is very interesting, especially for a player like Devon Benjamin, where, we got a chance to talk to John Richardson on Tuesday, and we kind of looked at it where Leroy Bryant is a really promising player. We really like what he brings to the table. We love what Dylan Robinson brings to the table as well. And we kind of look at what this 2026 corner room could look like with both Tacario Davis and Ephesians Prescott graduating. And it's, hey, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to get on the field early. And that's something that John Richardson was selling early, because I fully believe we'll see Dylan Robinson burn his red shirt at some point this season. But on top of that, it's, if you can sell that to another big time prospect and just reload that room, that's something that I think can't just go understated when we look at just the current state of that position.
Yeah, it reminds me almost slightly in a way what they did at receiver, where you don't normally expect them to take that many, but it's like, what, let's just kind of reset the room. We did it when we first came in, where we brought, I think they had 7 or 8 new guys come in that first class when Jedd arrived, let's call it. And since then, we haven't seen it. We've seen some of those guys, but not a ton. And I think now you're going to start to say, okay, as we process through some of those guys, let's kind of rehash on the back end, backfill it, if you will, but still kind of get some premium talent in there where you can say, hey, you know what? We expect you to be pushing. We expect you guys to, develop and come along. So by the time we get, let's call it 26, 27, you're talking about a confident 2 deep that you can look at and say, that's a, senior, you got a couple of juniors, and then a sophomore mixed in there, to where all those guys end up still popping at the right time.
So I like where we're going with that. I just want to make sure we move on, because we also need to talk about this Landon Barnes situation. Well, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about there, and I probably didn't lead it in the best way there. But this 4-star defensive end, or edge rusher really, from Texas, who was supposed to come up on an official visit this weekend, but has pushed it back to May 30th. And it's just something to note where, we're talking about all the other official visitors, and seeing him move his schedule around a little bit and still consider Washington being, a blue chip recruit from Texas is nice to see. But I kind of wanted to use this as a chance to talk about what this defensive line class could look like by the time it's all said and done.
I agree with that. And speaking of kind of the key with that is when all is said and done, we're looking at Landon's official visits. He doesn't have a ton of others set in terms of schedule and in between now and then, but a guy that is clearly coveted by many schools. And when you're Washington, you're, big on not T.I. over Kites. There we go.
Yeah.
Too many T.I.s going there. But you just look down the list and every time you think of a Texas defensive lineman, Levi always comes to mind. Now, again, this isn't a like-for-like comparison, but another one where you look and think, hey, nobody, really, 4-star from Texas, he's got, some of these schools to look at, and he ends up at Washington. Like, how'd they figure that one out? Levi. So Levi was the exact same result, which was, really, you're choosing Washington over TCU or over, I forgot what other school was in the mix in this final 3 at the end there. Because to me, you're probably taking, 3-4 defensive linemen at least, like not a ton, but like maybe 2-3. Like
I think it's gonna be a really big class.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I wanted to pull up his visits just to double check here, where the only other visit he has set up right now is Arizona State, and actually that one already happened. That was on April 4th, according to 247 Sports. Mm-hmm. So I look at that and I just say I think this is going to be a really big class of defensive linemen, where you need to reload the position anyway, and it's like the conversation we had a little bit earlier, where you have a whole bunch of guys who can certainly contribute, but you want to level it up. Where we talk about T.I. Umakais, where that's one of those guys where he certainly just has we talk about his film a lot, where he has just all the tools of somebody who can thrive in the middle, just with his plan as a pass rusher, his size, all of that is really nice. And then we look at, whether it be Dakota Dixon or somebody else on the interior, there are other ways you can make that work with players like Fasiale, with David Schwartzel, because those are guys, if they're going to commit, you're not going to turn them down. And this is without mentioning the 2 biggest names that you're recruiting on the just on the defensive line. I almost said the interior, but Derek Coleman-Bruce on the edge, and Bot Mulitalo, who he's still listed as an offensive lineman, but you and I both fully believe will end up back on the defensive line by the time he chooses a college. So I look at all that and I say, you're not turning any of those guys down. And I didn't even say Anthony Jones's name, another 4-star that you're in the mix for. Sean Scott from Mater Dei, who you hosted for a visit. I don't know if he'll, end up on the edge. I think he certainly could. He's very talented. But if he ends up at inside linebacker, that's just a rumor I've heard as well. You are in on so many prospects. There are still other guys out there who I'm sure I'm just blanking on at this moment, like Kari Wilder. Kari Wilder is another one where, hey, that's a 4-star. You're not turning that guy down if he wants to commit. So there are so many bodies that you're involved with that if you're able to take 6, 7 of them, you're reloading the talent in a way that you really want to, especially with so many of these guys being out of eligibility after 2025 or 2026.
I agree with you. Just the only reason why I'm always hesitant to say, like, you put all those 7 ships in the high school recruits is now you got to somehow stagger their progression in terms of you're probably redshirting 3 or 4 playing. There's just a depth thing that when you look down the line, I think, 7 bodies could come in before the start of next season, not 25 but 26. But you look at that and think, they might want to supplement a couple of transfers just somewhere in there. So maybe that overall number ends up being, call it 5 high school defensive linemen / edges and then 2 more from the portal to get to your 7 number. Because I agree, they do need to replenish the position. But like we saw in the secondary, well, if you go all high school in that, you kind of have a depth issue down the line.
But I don't think it's so much of a matter of that is where, you look at a lot of the guys on the interior. There is eligibility there. Where, whether it be Alinius Davis, Omar Khan is somebody, then the guys in the 25 class where Dominic Mick and Caleb Smith, you have some of that eligibility where Jedd has talked about just building everything up through the high school ranks, where that's going to be the basis of this program. And if you want to supplement that with 1, 2, as you said, from the portal, that's certainly fine, but you'd rather have it be a lot of guys that you get in the door as a high schooler and then you have for 3, 4, 5 years. So I think that's just something to consider as you just replenish the depth at the position. But Lars, that's all we got time for today. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thank to all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will talk to you on Friday.